Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Stu Clark here. So today we're going to look at shooting bank B on the Nikon Z8. This one's actually taken me it's been a while trying to get this video together. Just been out shooting a ton, really trying to dial these settings in. I had some, originally when I set it up, had certain expectations that didn't actually follow through when I actually got out in the field. So I've been tweaking them a little bit, changes here, changes there, and I finally feel that I'm really happy with how it's set up. And I feel it's time to kind of make the video and share it with you guys. So first off, I want to say a huge thanks to all the new subscribers. Really appreciate it. It's getting so close to that magic 1,000 subscriber mark. I might actually hit the 4,000 hours and 1,000 subscribers potentially on the same day, getting so close. So hopefully next day or two. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So this video, it's actually going to probably be broken down into two videos. I'm going to do the photo side of it first, and then we'll do the video side of it. Because of my Shooting Bank A video, a lot of it was combined with my autofocus videos. This one, because of the changes I've made, I think I'll have to break it down into photo and video just to make it a little bit more, not 2 hours long. How about that for an answer? Okay, my Shooting Bank A, all about speed. Shooting Bank B is basically about quality. It's about quality, but it's also about me taking a little bit more control from the auto side of things and kind of me picking the focus points. I'll be setting the ISO a little bit lower. Like I said, trying to maximize quality in a more difficult setting. Shooting Bank A is kind of the estuary setting, we'll say. Out in the open, lots of birds flying, lots of activity, and it's that run and gun, quick catch the shot as birds fly by, as an otter swims past, that sort of thing. Shooting Bank B is going to be much more of, I'll call it my forest/portraiture setting, and portraits of birds and mammals and animals. I don't shoot people. I don't photograph people, I should say. The idea behind this is I'm going to switch everything, kind of get ISO a little bit lower. The frames per second on the video is going to be 30 frames per second. So it's going to be a real-time video, real-time audio. And that's going to be the basis for this. This is kind of going out and getting, as you know, I don't want to say top quality because there are some settings higher, but basically that's kind of where we're going with this. Let's just jump right into the camera and we'll kind of talk, and then there'll be a lot of overlay from when I've been out in the field where you can actually see how these settings are applied and how I utilize them in the field. Like always, so we're going to hit the I menu. We're going to switch from Shooting Bank A to Shooting Bank B. We're going to go to the custom settings menu. We're going to shoot from A, switch over to B. So this allows it where you can see how quick it is. It's such an easy way to basically change the entire performance of the camera by switching those two I menu buttons. And we've kind of, in the Shooting Bank A video, we've kind of covered how I use the I menus there. So I'll leave that. If you want to figure out why I did that and how I did that, you can check out the Shooting Bank A video. Let's get to the photo side of it. Okay, so a lot of this is going to be in default mode. So standard dynamic range for tone mode, image quality, we're shooting RAW. I don't shoot RAW plus JPEG or anything else. I just, for my needs, I really don't need a backup in that situation. CF Express, and before that, the XQD has been so reliable for me. And if I miss a shot, I miss the shot. It'd be unfortunate, but you know, unless it was a Sasquatch running down the road, it's not a life-changing thing for me. It's not like I shoot weddings. If I shot weddings, I would definitely use a backup of a JPEG to the SD card. But for my use, speed is far more important. And the SD card in the Z8 is just too slow. It just slows the whole camera down. So it's not really, doesn't make any sense to have that as a backup. Raw recording, this is one we've made a change. We've switched from the high efficiency star to the lossless compressed. So Nikon, the lossless compressed, they used to have an uncompressed file format. They've now changed it. They only have the lossless compressed with the Z8. And essentially there is no loss of detail. And that's why they have done this. And so, but it is a little bit higher quality than the high efficiency star. And the reason I've made the changes here is that the forest setting is going to be my, that's where I get most of my sellable images. Things like owls, warblers, a lot of the shots in the woods are really important to me in order to get, a super high quality photo. And so where the loss is compressed, it will give you a little bit more editability. And so in a forest setting, especially owls, especially if they're up in the canopy a little bit, you're likely to get a hot spot coming through the trees. The owl might be in a bit of a shadow. And the combination of the two, the lossless compressed will give you a little bit more ability to kind of knock the highlights down and bring up the shadows with the most detail. And that's why we switched to a lossless compressed in this format. ISO sensitivity settings. This one, I would really struggle with this one. I was going to kind of cap it a little bit lower, but I think after shooting the owls this week, I think there's a real case for kind of having the maximum sensitivity in around 8,000, if not even 10,000 ISO is the maximum sensitivity for auto ISO. Obviously for quality, you want to have a lower ISO, but because this is going to be my forest setting, high likelihood of running into a cougar, a bear, pine marten, something like that. That might be a quick grab shot, and I don't want to be switching to my shooting bank A in the moment. So be having the ISO where it can ride a little bit higher, you can still get your shutter speed up in that. I find for a lot of things in the woods, 1/250 a second is my minimum ideal shutter speed. 1/500 will capture almost everything in the forest setting. You're not really going for in-flights in the forest setting so much. So I find that 8,000 ISO is probably fine as a cap on this right now. And then minimum shutter speed, I just leave it auto. Again, with minimum, because we're going to be using manual mode, a lot of this will just be manually adjusting to the shutter speed I need to capture my subject. It's a bit different than out in the estuary setting where I'll set the minimum shutter speed at 1/1000, 1/1600 a second, just maximize the flyovers. So like I said, the forest setting, I will definitely generally be running a lower shutter speed in general. Again, just to keep that ISO a stop and a half lower. And white balance is auto too, which is on the slightly warmer side. This basically keeps it a little bit warmer. I tried the natural light auto and it works really well. I just found that I ended up tending to keep warming things up a little bit, just my preference. White balance is definitely, it's a preferential thing, and it is going to depend on how your monitors are calibrated, the settings you're watching these in. But that's kind of, for me, I like the auto 2, which is the warm balance. Picture control, I just said it's standard. It just applies minimal editing in camera. So it gives me a nice profile when I open up in Lightroom. I know what I'm getting. I'm kind of used to looking at those files, so it just makes sense for there. Color space, Adobe. I use Adobe color space on all my cameras. Just a little bit larger color profile versus sRGB. It's one of those things that's not applied. It's just applied in camera, but the raw file you can switch the color space around. So it's one of those things. I just like having Adobe as my main one. It's what I've been using for so long. I know what I'm looking at when I open the files in Lightroom. And a lot of these in-camera settings, when you open them in Lightroom, it's kind of what you're used to, and you can apply a lot of these, but the problem is, for me, what I find, I have to then take them off in order to do my proper editing in Lightroom, because I basically want to zero everything to some level, so that I know I have my kind of clean starting point, because not all the shots are going to be shot in the same light, in the same situation, shadows and highlights and all the like. So that's why I like to keep this fairly simple. And that's why active delighting, all of these are going to be off. So active delighting, long exposure noise reduction, high ISO noise reduction, vignette control, all of that will be done on the computer. I think, between Lightroom denoise and Topaz for sharpening or denoise, the software in many cases is going to be better than what's done in camera. So there's no point in having it applied in camera and then having to take it off in order to apply it on the computer side of things. So just easier to turn all that off. Just be aware when you're opening up a raw file, it might look noisy, it might not look as sharp as you would expect because you've turned everything off. If you've had a lot of these settings set up where you've got a lot of aggressive noise reduction and sharpening applied, and then you turn all these off, you're going to think your camera doesn't work or the lens doesn't work. So what you initially see in Lightroom might not look nearly what you're going to end up with. I'm going to be doing an editing video down the road here, and between Lightroom and Topaz, it's unbelievable what you can do on the software side of things with images. Skin softening off, portrait impression balance, that can be off. Photo flicker reduction, this is always going to be used outside, so that'll be off. High frequency flicker reduction, same thing, off, outside. Metering, so matrix metering is really, really important for photo setting for the shooting menu bank B. For the bank A, a lot of people are commenting about using the highlight weighted metering. Highlight weighted metering does work really well in an open environment. I actually really like it at the beach. And basically what it does, it'll pick up the brightest spot on the sensor and meter off of that. The problem is when you get into the woods, as I was saying, you've got that hot spot up in where it's breaking through the canopy and you've got an owl on a branch. The camera's going to meter off that bright hot spot and it's going to make the owl black. So you really don't want to be using a highlight weighted in the forest. It really doesn't work, at least from my experience. So with matrix metering, how matrix metering works is the whole sensor is being utilized for for the camera to pick the exposure. So then if you can see when you look, if your subject is in the shadow, just plus, and you just dial up the exposure a little bit to brighten your subject. Vice versa, if your subject's a little bit brighter against a darker background, you know, is a bit of sun coming through and hitting your subject, you just dial the minus exposure compensation down. So it's a really simple, it works really well. And for my brain, I use matrix metering all the time. It's what I've used on all my cameras, going back to probably even D70, D200 days. And I've just gotten so used to reading the whole scene. So what I see through the viewfinder, I know whether to dial the exposure compensation up or down based on what I'm seeing in the viewfinder. And it's really simple. That's what I use, and it's worked really well for me. We're not going to talk anything about flash today at all. We'll leave that for another video. That's a whole other beast. AFC is kind of my only focus mode I use in this camera. Because I use the AF on button, I basically have AFS built in. All I do is take my thumb off, take my thumb off, and it won't keep focusing. Nikons are amazing too, because you just start focusing manually and it is a manual override. So you basically, by having just AFC set, using AF on button as AFS, manually override it, you basically have all three built in, even though you only have it as AFC as your only focus mode being enabled. That's what I use. AFC is great. It works excellent. So AF area mode, and this is where I've made some changes over my photo bank A. It'll be 3D tracking is going to be the one I go out the door with. And this one is, so like I said, I want to be taking a bit more control back from the camera. So this is where I'm going to be with 3D tracking. I put the focus point over the bird, engage AF on, and then it will start to maintain that subject. If I find that it's struggling, it's starting to move around a little bit, I've now also gone to the custom area function 2. So with this one, what I've done, as you can see, I've gone to a small box in the middle as my custom function 2. And I really like this. So I've been shooting this for a few weeks now. And what it allows me to do is the box is basically about the size of the head of an owl. So you can put it right over the head of the owl. Depending which way the owl is turning, you're going to see the eye, it'll pick up one eye to the other, because with custom function 2, the subject detection is enabled. And it's really nice. I'm able to, and I just move that around. It kind of goes back to my DSLR days. My D500, I always shot with a single point. That's the only autofocus mode I used. And I just basically moved the focus point as needed over the bird. With AF on, you can kind of, you basically can focus on the bird, then move to recompose. So with this, I'll probably use 3D in that section, so I can just put it over the head. But then the custom function 2, and where I found the custom function 2 worked really, really well. Photographing owls the other night, and it was really dark. And it was dark, and the bird is in the shadows as well. So it made for a very difficult subject. And it was a bit distant, so I had a teleconverter on. The auto AF area wasn't engaging. It was picking up false subjects all the time. 3D tracking also was struggling to get on the bird. And what happened was, every time the owl would turn its head or close its eyes, the autofocus would wander. So by constraining it to the small box over top of the head, it was great. It just stayed, it focused right there. That's where it stayed, and it worked super well. 3D will be what I walk out the door with this mode. 3D works great in most situations. Subject detection option, birds. Birds are 90%, 95% of what I photograph, especially this time of year. On road trips, you know, if I head up to Jasper, places like that, I'll probably switch to mammal or animal detect in those situations. But for the most part, bird AF is going to be what I pick. Vibration reduction. Right now I've got a Z lens on here. Typically I'm using an FTZ adapted 200 to 500. And then the vibration reduction is actually selected on the lens. It's actually not selected in body. But you're going to typically want for birds to use sport mode. Sport mode works excellent for 90% of what you're shooting. Where you'll switch it to normal mode is in really low light, low shutter speed conditions, and then you get the extra vibration reduction. The downside is the viewfinder jumps around. If you move at all, the viewfinder can be quite jumpy, and I don't like that. So that's why I use sport as my primary vibration reduction. Auto bracking, everything else here is going to be off. And so this is, I've got them, you can switch, I can switch some of these things on in the eye menu. I've got pixel shift and focus shift on the eye menu. I generally won't use it from shooting bank B, but the eye menu I find has got so many duplicate things. I find there's actually not a lot of uses for all the different features in the eye menu. So I've kind of thrown them up there just if the situation I wanted, you know, and I want to just take a quick pixel shift for a high quality landscape shot, I can just do a quick pixel shift shot from my eye menu. So let's have a look now. So that's the photo shooting menu. So let's now look at the custom settings menu. So custom setting menu B, this is where you can kind of take deeper control of your camera. Initially, I wasn't going to utilize the custom setting menu. I kind of liked having the camera set a certain way. But as I've dove more into the banks, and I didn't, like I said, my D500, I kept it, it was really simple. I just kept it in one shooting mode, and I just had single point most of the time. It worked for me, but the Z8 is so much more complex, and the video side of it. So the video side of it is the driving force behind a lot of these different shooting menu banks. And it's about having the photo and video side of things make sense in the different banks you're in. So custom setting menu bank, let's look at the focus. So AFC, you definitely want this on release. So this means you press the button, it takes the photo. I really don't like the focus release option or the focus option. Basically, it has to be in focus in order for it to take the photo. And that just doesn't make sense. There's too many times in wildlife where the focus might be off a millimeter or the camera's not detecting that it's in focus. It won't take the shot, and I want every photo being taken. I don't want it not shooting. So I just definitely want this on release. It's quick enough to edit down the road. I want every shot being captured. AFS, don't utilize it at all. Focus tracking with lock on. This one is, I'm going to use this at the default mode, which is 3, and then subject motion is steady. The default mode has worked really well for me, and I haven't had a need to change it on this camera as of yet. But yeah, so 3 and steady, that seems to work really well. Focus points used, I use them all. That way you can compose as needed, and you can kind of just make sense. I find that the alternating points where it jumps a little bit more than I like, and depending on, especially if you've got the tripod locked off, you want to be able to kind of put the focus point exactly where you want it. So this is when, as you rotate the camera, you go from portrait mode to landscape mode. It'll stay on the same focus setting. This one I liked. It's actually one I typically want off, and the reason being is if you're walking in the trail, you've got the camera in portrait mode as you're carrying it, and then you switch to landscape mode. Sometimes it takes a second for it to switch back, and I just assume it be off and just kind of, it's, you don't want to be switching, you don't want it moving around on you, myself anyway. AF activation, so AF on only. I use the AF on button as my focus button, and then the shutter button is disengaged for focusing. A lot of people comment with 3D, you can use the shutter button for tracking, and for sure it makes sense for that. But the way I've kind of just gotten so used to the AF on button being my focus button, that's what I'm just going to stick with that. For me, that's just the way it works. So focus point persistence, I've got this one on auto. So with the focus point persistence, it maintains your subject. So as you're switching between the different, if you've got subject tracking enabled, it will maintain the focus on your subject when you're switching between modes. So it's great. You know, if you need a bigger square in order to pick up your subject, then you want to switch to 3D tracking, it will maintain the focus point on that spot. So that's a really good one. You definitely want to have that one on. Limit AF area mode selection. So I actually have changed this one. So I've actually taken auto area AF off of this one. I really like having it with just 3D tracking, the wide area AF, and a single point. And I find that having too many options, you're pushing the button trying to get between, to cycle between them all, and you're going to miss the moment. And by kind of, in each bank, I'm going to kind of limit things. So shooting bank A was auto area F and 3D, all about action, quick, grab the shot. This one, I'm taking a bit more control, so I'm getting rid of that auto area AF, 3D tracking where you are putting the focus point over the subject, then it tracks from there, and then also the custom area 2 that I've set up with a smaller box, and this way, and then the single point, which is huge. I find single point, especially in shooting bank B, is really important to have enabled. Continuous AF is going to be the only focus mode that I utilize for any of my banks. Focus point wraparound I have off. So focus point wraparound means that as you push to the right, the focus point will go switch back to the left as it circles around. Really don't like that. I want it at one edge or the other and I'll move it. I don't want it zipping around on me. That's my take anyway. Some people like it, I don't. Focus point display. So the new one here, everything's on. The new one is the focus point border width, and this was part of the firmware 2.0, and I've gone to 2, so it makes for a thicker border around your focus point, and I really like it. It really helps see where your focus point is, and works excellent, and I really like the 2. It seems just performs really well. Focus peaking. So focus peaking is a big part of shooting bank B, and this is where when you start manually focusing. So with focus peaking, you do have to have your thumb on the AF on button in order to see the focus peaking. So if you've got your thumb on the AF on button, as you start manually focusing, it will switch to manual focus even though you're holding the AF on button down. And you'll see the focus peaking red lines come up. And it's just amazing. You can just kind of dial right into the bird's eye. You'll see all the red lines kind of moving forward or backward as you're focusing. This one is so beneficial, especially if you've got a warbler or something you're trying to pick out of a busier, in a tree forest environment, you want to pull it out of the background. Really found it the other day. I was photographing an owl, and it was this tiny little window that I was able to find through the cedars. And so having the focus peaking where you kind of move it past the branches was huge, and it worked super well. And if you're struggling, if your autofocus settings are struggling, having focus peaking on has really worked great. I'd highly recommend playing with that one a bit and kind of getting used to that one. So focus point selection speed, I'm actually going to switch this one to normal. I find sometimes the high is a little bit too quick, where you overshoot your subject a bit, at least I find, and normal is kind of a little bit more used to it, where it's kind of, you can just quickly move it to where you want it, and it seems to be a little bit preferential to me. I tried high, but I think the normal is a better setting for me. All of these will be default, I believe. Matrix metering with the face detection on. So this will, not sure how this works with birds. I know from a portrait standpoint with people, it'll meter off the face of your subject. So it'll brighten it up and basically meter from the face a little bit more. But I don't know if it works from a bird standpoint, if it's just with humans. Everything else here is going to be off. I do have power to display menus I've got to 1 minute. I think I've changed a few of these up a little bit, but this will be a preferential thing. This doesn't impact your shooting at all. So this is going to be a preference thing. Continuous high speed. So when you're shooting lossless compressed over high efficiency star, the reason I have gone that route too is you will notice the buffer. You hit the buffer a lot more with the lossless compressed compared to high efficiency. So the iMenu. So the iMenu is the two things that I have put on every single iMenu on this camera are shoot and custom in the same place. And this allows me to switch between my shooting banks and my custom menu banks. And these are huge. This is the most important thing for iMenu. I find a lot of the other things are you can actually access from dials and buttons on the camera externally. So the iMenu I find has got limited function when I'm out shooting. I don't actually go into it that much, except for this. So this allows me to quickly change between my banks, and that makes it so awesome. It works so well. Other than that, this is going to be kind of a preferential thing depending on what you might need out there. I put focus shift shooting and pixel shift shooting on this one, basically because I didn't really have a need for a lot of the spaces on here. A lot of things available in the iMenu, like I said, are just redundant, so I don't really need them on there. So I added a few things that I don't have access to short of going into the full menu. Okay, so custom control shooting. So this is where it gets interesting. So function 1 is, so the recall shooting functions hold. This one is quite an important one for me. And this one I've got set up where the only thing I have it changed to is AF area mode is my single point. So basically how this works is when I'm shooting, when I press the custom function 1 button, single press, it changes my camera to single point focus mode. Then you have to press it again and it goes back to where your cycle AF area mode is engaged again. So basically it's one press, turn it on, one press, turn it off. It is an on and off function button. What's nice though, you don't have to hold it. And how I have this set, so when you look at it, I've got everything unchecked. And the reason I have everything unchecked is at this point, I've already been shooting. I'm out there, and for whatever reason, my my AF points, my 3D tracking or my subject tracking is not picking up the subject. A lot might be low light. It might be a busy area. There might be a lot of branches in the foreground that the auto areas keep picking up. So the idea by having single point is there's no subject detection with single point, and basically it focuses where I want it to. I put it on the little spot. I'm picking out the bird's eye through some branches. Like I said, I was photographing this owl, and it was literally a little window that you could kind of, where your tripod up and you're trying to shoot through this tiny little spot in order to get onto the bird. And so that's one of the situations where I don't want the camera picking up anything else. I want it focusing right here, and I'm the one deciding where it focuses. I'm taking all of the camera decisions away from the camera, and I'm the one that's picking the focus point. And that's why I've got single point picked. I have it both on my shooting bank A and my shooting bank B in the same spot, my function 1 button. And the reason you want to have everything unchecked is if you have, say you've got your shutter speed checked or something else, it will then change it from where you're already set. So like I said, at this point, I'm already shooting. My camera is set for the subject I'm already on. It's the only thing that's not working is the focus. And that's why, and that's the only thing I want changed. I want to change it from my custom area or my 3D tracking over to single point. And so this is really important. That's the only thing I want to have checked. So basically, AF area mode, single point is the only thing checked, and that's basically complete override to single point focus. It works phenomenal. I've used it. Been using it a ton. Marsh wrens the other day, where you've got all the bull rush and everything else. And the single point, you can just pick the bird out through all the bushes. It's sitting in the back there. It works so well, and it avoids any false autofocus pickups of branches that are in the foreground. So that one is really important, and that's kind of, that'll be in all my banks now. It just works so well. And then Cycle AF area mode, which was part of the firmware 2.0, is now in its same place, shooting bank in function 2. So shooting bank A and shooting bank B have got both the function 1 and function 2 buttons on the photography side of it in the same location. And I find it really important because muscle memory in the moment, I know where to go to get what I need, and I'm not trying to cycle through things. So with Cycle AF area mode, what I'm finding, I've tried different ones, I've tried to add, and for me, out in the field, in the moment, I only want 2 options. I find the third option is just, you end up, you're pushing the button and you're going past it, you're not. And I find I want bang, bang, 2 buttons, and then the third is the function 1 to go to single point. And so what I've done here is I've gone to the wide area, custom area 2, it can be custom 1, it doesn't matter. I just happen to pick 2. And basically it's not the smallest square, it's a medium-sized square. It's a medium-sized square, and it's great. I basically have got it, it's basically the size of an owl's head in a typical composition. So it basically covers both eyes of an owl's head in what I would consider a nice composition. Same if you got a warbler, it'd probably cover most of the warbler in a typical composition, or half the body, and then the subject detection works within that box. So I'm taking control of where I want the focus point to be. I'll just slide it over. It works so well. I've been utilizing it in different situations, low light, busy situations, lots of branches, everything else, and I'm able to really pick the subject up. Combine that with 3D tracking as my other option. So with my Cycle Area AF, I basically go between the wide area AF and 3D tracking. They're the 2 things I'm utilizing in shooting bank B. It gives me a lot more control over where I want the focus point to be, and avoids a lot of the false positives where it's picking up a branch, it's picking up. The one thing I've noticed a few times, I had a bull rush that had a bit of an eye on it, but I was photographing a song sparrow, and the song sparrow was just behind it, and it wanted to pick up this like circle on the bull rush. Same thing, I was photographing birds in my yard the other day, and there was a knot in the tree and on the branch, and it wanted to pick up the knot on the branch as seeing that as an eye. So these are some of the reasons why when I'm dealing with this in the forest setting, lower light, and you've got to, it's to avoid those false autofocus pickups, and I'm kind of zeroing in tighter, and that's why I've eliminated the auto area AF for the forest setting. And so far, it's making sense. It seems to be working for me. I can switch with the autofocus settings you've got on the AF button. So a lot of the buttons I have maintained as the default button because it's what I've used to shooting the D500 and also the shooting bank A and shooting bank B. I want to have a lot of the same features in the same spot. I don't want to be messing around with it. You can really customize each bank, but I'm primarily a wildlife photographer, so these banks are kind of a tweak for settings, like environmental settings and subject settings based on the environment, as opposed to a wholesale change of wildlife to landscape to everything else. I find I originally was going to have the 4 banks set up a bit differently, and I found that, so my shooting bank C is going to also be a wildlife bank as well, I think. And my shooting bank D, which originally is going to have C as my landscape and then D as my studio. And I kind of looking at it a little bit further, and I realized that my studio is almost always going to be video. And my landscape shooting, I don't really take a lot of photos in studio, so I might as well put the photo side of it on the shooting bank D and then utilize shooting bank C with the 60 frames per second, and then I can also then utilize it for the photo side of it for wildlife. Problem with this camera, if you start making wholesale changes between the banks, you're lost. You just, it sounds good in theory. You can really dial everything in and you can get this perfect for this and this. The reality it is when you get out in the field, you're pushing the wrong button. And that's what I found when I had the high res zoom with the function 1 and function 2. I kept pushing those trying to change the AF area mode. So I realized I have to go back and my AF area mode or function 1 and function 2, that's how I'm going to change it for photo and video. And it's kind of ingrained in me now. Those are the buttons to change my autofocus area modes. So I've made that decision. That's where it has to be for all my wildlife banks. Things happen too quick, so it's just got to be there. My shooting bank C, I have yet to dial that one in. I need to spend some time. I have a feeling it might end up being my wildlife one, and I'll set that up with my animal AF instead of the bird eye AF. And I've had a lot of people asking about how, how do you switch between bird and animal? Right now, I just use the eye menu or the autofocus menu to switch between them. But I think that it might make sense to make my shooting bank C my wildlife shooting bank. And that way, if I encounter a moose, an elk, something like that, I can just switch to shooting bank C, and that'll kind of help. And then I'll also then tweak some of the video settings around that. And 60 frames per second might actually make sense there because a lot of times wildlife aren't making noise. It will be in a little bit lower light. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna put some thought to shooting bank C. It's funny, I just kind of triggered some ideas there. So my shooting bank C, I think, is gonna be my wildlife specific one, and need some work. I'll need to get out and get out in the field over the next few weeks here and really kind of dial that one in as well. So the one button I've put on my bank A and bank B, and it'll be on bank C as well, is custom function 3 is silent mode. It is awesome. It is such a great feature. And basically it's just press of a button, camera goes quiet. Photographing hummingbirds the other day, had a male annas, and the shutter noise that I use is actually very similar to the ticking call that they make. And he was looking at me and shooting, hit the silent button. He didn't pay attention to me at all, shot away. It was just worked really well. Same thing anytime you're dealing with birds, it might be a little bit jumpy. Just tap of the button, goes to silent mode. I do typically like a little bit of shutter noise. And with this one, I actually have turned down the shutter noise to 1 instead of 2. When I'm out at the estuary, I wanted it 2 because it tends to be a lot more ambient noise, waves crashing, gulls calling, all that stuff. But when I'm in the forest, I found that turning it down to 1 made sense just to quiet it down a little bit more. So AF on button, again, leave that as is. Reset button, so the joystick is the reset button as well as the OK button is the reset. So it basically puts the focus point back in the middle. I had toyed with making the joystick button FX to DX. Because I shoot with the zoom lens, I can't use that. I was out the other day, and the problem when in photos, it's just so easy to crop in software after the fact. But what I found was, because I've got a zoom lens, if you shoot with a prime, it's a little bit different because you're used to a certain focal length. That pressing FX or DX, it's a little bit, I think it's got some benefit there. But shooting with the zoom, I need to zoom out a little bit. I zoomed out a little bit, not realizing I was in DX mode. So I got a lower quality image than I should have. And that's not going to happen again. So I've eliminated the FX to DX option on the photo side of it. For video side of it, that is where I use it. The joystick FX to DX for all my video modes is amazing because makes for a 4K crop in the camera as opposed to trying to do it in software and zooming in and losing quality. So FX to DX for switching in video makes perfect sense. On the photo side of it, I only shoot in FX and then we'll crop in post. Display button, I leave as the display button. I said the OK is the reset button. That's just default. Everything else here is default. So this is one that I've actually been utilizing, and I really, really, really like this one. So this is the release mode. And what this allows me, so I made it so the record button in the shooting menu goes to release mode. So this is a really quick way if you want to use the pre-capture and where it switches to JPEG. It's just a really quick way to have it where it's on the same size. The shutter button, quick press of that, dial down. You can go to 30 frames per second with the pre-capture. It's not a feature I use very often, but I find I use it a lot more now that I've got it on the right side here, as opposed to having to push the button on the left side and spin the dial. It just makes it a lot easier to access it. So I really like using that one there and having that one there. So that's worked, using that on both Shooting Bank B and Shooting Bank and on Shooting Bank A as well. Exposure compensation, I leave that where it is. ISO, same, leave that as default. And then the command dials. And everything else I leave at default. So one caveat, I don't have a Z lens right now. If you have a Z lens, there's definitely a bunch of these custom controls that you can attribute to buttons on the lens, and also the dials on, or the rings on the lens. I haven't gone there yet. I haven't had a chance to play with any Z lenses beyond just the 16 to 50 that came with my Z30. If you have a Z lens, you can definitely kind of get a little bit deeper into the custom settings with the buttons and dials on the Z lens. So that's something to definitely explore a little bit as well. And that is the custom controls for the camera. Further on, custom controls. I don't use any custom controls to play back. I am not a chimper. I do not look at the photos in the field. It's just something I've just never really got into. I don't like doing it. I definitely don't delete in the field. All that. I shot with so many people over the years where they missed the moment because looking at the back of the camera. And so I refuse to. When I'm out shooting, I'll do the odd check, just to make sure things are in focus and everything else. But pretty confident with the settings and utilizing these cameras over the years that don't really need to check the back to make sure things are as they are. I'm pretty confident they are. So custom playback control, there's no benefit for me having them set in camera. That's all done in post in Lightroom. Control lock, I don't utilize control lock for the photo menu. I definitely use it on the video side. It's and I've posted a video on that, on how you can basically use the control lock to set your shutter speeds for video. It works fantastic. I highly recommend you check that one out. Reverse dial rotation, I have definitely done some tweaking on some of these. I've unchecked them. This is one that's a personal preference. I want the dials and the meters to go the way I expect them to. But your mileage will differ there. That's more of a usage thing, so we're not going to get into that too much. And that's just kind of what you've gotten used to. Same thing with the reverse indicators. But I kind of like plus on the right, minus on the left, just personal preference. Reverse ring for focus. And again, this is only with Z lenses. It doesn't work with an FTZ adapted lens. Don't have a power zoom, so that's. And then we're down to the video mode. Okay, so that's kind of the skinny of it with the photo side of it. And then I'm going to follow this up with the video settings. The video settings dives a little bit deeper into the video side of it. And I think for the scope of it, we're already at a good amount of time here. So that'll be the next video that we hope to get together. Right on. Thanks for watching today. Hope you got a lot out of this video, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Till next time, see you out there.